You're one of the twins. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I will learn. I apologize. Okay, I'm gonna go start to go outside.
That's good.
I think it's only 2 humans.
Elaine said you guys have lots of furniture that she brought back from Taiwan.
How are you doing? Just making sure that I get my
You need to have an estate sale or something.
How? Okay, wait. I do know that. I probably will go somewhere to Tuesday. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
How far is it?
45 minutes.
There we go. Boy, I saw my
Which
grade.
Derby?
I just wanted to let you know. I felt really good. You got quiz right after. Like it was. I felt more confident on that one than.
Oh, okay.
But I'm probably any so far. That was especially awesome. So I just thought I'd let you know.
So what did you do with it?
Yes, ma'am, that's what I'm coming for.
So let's review it.
I got cookies on
Dwight, can you just I think I know it, but just as a verbal confirmation of the format,
Good.
you're going to give introductions, right?
No.
Katie will. Okay, and then did you want us to say something, or are we going directly into the question and answer?
No, I think it still works. We're going to say something about your, well, what you've done, what, if you have different things about your memories coming up, or if you want to say it first, that's great.
Okay.
I would think, you could take up a half hour or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, the three of us, so about 5-10 minutes.
okay.
Okay, and then is this the audience? Who are we speaking to?
Yeah, this is the audience. It is live streamed. I don't know to what extent.
But I mean, are they required to be here? Or is this not? So I know who I'm speaking to. Is this like combo? Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
That gives me a better.
Does some want to be here? Some are actually looking for jobs?
Yeah.
I got job offers ready to hand
Yeah,
out.
I think everywhere is, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If you guys just want to sit up and talk about
I do have like some koozies and stuff from the company. Don't like some pens and stuff. Like, just
that's fine.
set them out. Like, you want them? Should I give them to you, or should I give them like?
You want to have them up there on the table?
Sure. They can.
Welcome people to come up and get.
Absolutely.
I asked for a bit of word.
Yeah, okay.
Ready?
You want me to bake it? Hands down, I'll do that. I'll figure it out.
What? No, it's actually.
We got the results back from the PET scan, and it shows that there were no spots that glowed on the periphery, so, but it's stage 3, so it's out of the question. So, they checked the 17 year old, 6 of them. That's why it's
Is he leaving? He took a look and then said never mind. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we're gonna kill with the.
Yeah.
Out of your mom. I will. Oh.
How many people were you? 1, 2.
Let's go.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
to the STEM Symposium. In this symposium, is to honor Richard Serker. Will you please stand, Richard? And in honor of Richard Serker, we have invited some former alumni, some alumni of Bethel College that were former students of Richard's. We have with us Eric Peters. Eric earned a BS in physics and a BS in chemistry from Bethel College in 1997. He has co-authored over 8 scientific publications and presentations, in addition to 1 patent application for the ballistic gas chromatograph. After Bethel, he was hired at MRI Global, which was formerly known as Midwest Research Institute in Kansas City, Missouri. He currently serves as principal chemist and a capability manager. Over his 24 years at MRI Global, his project work has allowed him to become proficient in chemical extraction and analysis, instrumentation design and validation, chemical synthesis, vapor generation, and medical countermeasure programs dealing with toxic industrial chemicals. Then we have next to Eric, Scott Torpor. Scott attended Bethel College from 1996 to 2000, where he earned his BS degree in chemistry. After graduating from Bethel, he immediately entered into the pharmaceutical world, joining Abbott Laboratories located in McPherson, Kansas. After gathering a few years of entry-level lab experience at Abbott, Scott relocated to Kansas City, where he worked in a large contract research organization as a laboratory automation specialist, programming and integrating robotics into analytical chemistry workflows. And then our third panel for this first session, or the third member on our panel for this third session, is Otis Beverly. Otis Beverly is a senior field application consultant at Waters Corporation. He received a BS in chemistry from Bethel College. And prior to joining Waters Corporation in 2017, Otis spent 13 years at MRI Global, a global contract research organization in Kansas City, Kansas, where he honed his skills in project management, LCM, SMS method development, and under-targeted screening by LCQTOF mass spec. So these are some mass spectroscopy techniques. As a Waters field application specialist, Otis enjoyed visiting customers to share his experiences with an instruction on Waters quadrupole and time-of-flight-based mass spectrometry systems to solve real problems. Otis is a champion of small molecule screening with Unify. So, one of the things that I really love about a degree in chemistry is that you can go lots of places with your chemistry degree. Here we have 3 individuals who took their chemistry degree to go work in industry, doing different things about industry, and they will gladly answer your questions about about their experiences at Bethel and how they took their routes, and what you can do if you want to follow their routes.
So let me just start off giving you a little bit about myself and kind of how I ended up where I am now. So I graduated from Bethel in 2004 with a degree in chemistry.
I left from Bethel. Actually, Eric Peters over here reached out to Richard Zerger and said, is there any folks there that are interested in taking a position at MRI Global after they graduate? And of course, I was like, I'm sick of being a broke college student, of course. I'll take that up immediately. So I ended up going and working at MRI Global for about 13 years before I transitioned. Oh, yeah, thank you. Before I transitioned over to Waters, where I now work in a position where I travel across the country, and if any of our customers purchase Waters equipment, Waters software, I work with them in their labs to train them on how to use our equipment and software. So I have the opportunity to go around and see all different types of fields. I have been in a forensic state lab in Washington, D.C. I've been in a cannabis lab in upstate New York. I've been in hospitals. So I've really had an opportunity to kind of see the whole industry, government, private, pharma. I just had an opportunity to kind of see all of that. So it's, really been eye-opening and a great experience.
How you guys doing? I understand that you all are here voluntarily. That's great. Thanks for coming. My name is Scott Turber, and like Catherine said, I graduated here in 2000. But first, I just want to say thank you to Richard. Where did you go? So Richard had a huge impact on my life. So thank you, Richard, for getting me through these 4 years. I think all of you are very lucky to be here at Bethel College. Yes. The level of support and the level of interest that your professors have in you, in your success is just amazing. And I just really thank you, Richard, and all my professors here. Dwight, I'm not for sure where you are. I was disappointed you weren't wearing your LabVIEW t-shirt, but that's all right. So anyhow, graduated here in 4 years, luckily, not 5, with a chemistry degree. And as my introduction said, I immediately went into the pharmaceutical world. And so when I graduated, I was really excited because I was going to be a chemist. And that meant a lot to me because I actually came to college to play sports, and I happened upon a degree. So I was really excited that I got to be a chemist, right? So here I am, I go into the pharmaceutical world, and I submit my application, I get hired, and I get my offer letter. And I was expecting, I'm a chemist, right? I have a chemistry degree, I'm gonna be able to take my future wife out to some really nice dinners, and I got an offer of $12 an hour, 3rd shift, working in the lab. So so of course I did it because, like I said, I didn't want to be broke, and so I went and did that. And I quickly realized that working 3rd shift, doing what I would call cookbook chemistry or quality control, right? So you're going in and you're just following a protocol, you're doing the same thing. I realized pretty quickly that, hey, I can do this for a while, but I want to try to find something else to spice it up. So what I did is I kind of took a leap of faith, and I went up to Kansas City, and I took a job as a laboratory automation specialist, really not knowing what that was. They just needed someone that knew computers and knew chemistry, and I had that skill set. So I went up there, and that's where I learned, my eyes kind of opened into a little bit of all the other opportunities that are there, right? It was a very large contract research organization. Really what that means is send me your samples, we'll analyze them, and you pay us money, and then we give you the results back. And they want to do it in a really high throughput environment. How do you do that? You're going to integrate robotics into it. So that was my job, was trying to figure out ways to integrate robotics into routine workflows, or what I would consider like that cookbook chemistry workflow. And so I did that for several years. And then lo and behold, my wife and I find out we're going to have our first kid, and we're terrified. So we decide to relocate back to my wife's hometown in a little tiny town called Blue Rapids, Kansas. There's all of 980 of us, right? How are you going to find a chemistry job in a town with 980 people? I ended up finding a job at Kansas State University and commuted there for a little while, and then ended up going to work for a startup company, a nanotechnology company, called Nanoscale Materials. It was really exciting. And that's, you know, in my career, I graduated with a BS degree, but I really consider the 5 years I spent at Nanoscale as my graduate experience. I had the opportunity to work with some amazing scientists that mentored me and was able to do tree research. And lo and behold, what we did is we manufactured nanomaterials to decontaminate chemical warfare agents. That was what we were trying to do, right? And of course, we can't handle real agents. It's against the law federally. So we had to send them somewhere. Guess where we send them? Over to this guy. And I didn't even know it, right? So I ran track with this guy, went to college with him, and I'm sending my samples to him and didn't even know it. So did that for several years, and then through the process, we needed, it's funny, we're all doing chromatography, I think, all here. We needed a chromatography system. What does that mean to you? It means we need to separate things, right? So we need to buy a chromatography system with something called a mass spectrometer for our workflow there. And in doing that, I met an engineer similar to Otis, a little bit different, that came in and installed it and trained us on it. And that's how I was introduced to Waters Corporation, where I now work as a mass spec specialist with Waters. And so, you know, I think it's really important as I sit here, you know, through your experiences and everything, I would encourage all of you to network. I hear that all the time, but what does that mean? It means just going up and introducing yourself to someone. If you do go get a job somewhere right out of college, everyone coming in, go introduce yourself. What do you do? How are you doing? Because if you keep your head down and you just chug along in the lab, you don't realize all this amazing stuff going on and all these opportunities are swirling around you. So with that, I'll let you say a few words, but go ahead.
Thank you. I would say my experience has been maybe the same, maybe a little bit different. But I'm working in the same job I did right out of college. So I've been there for 24 years. I was super happy to get this job. But since I didn't really bounce around between a bunch of different places, I kind of thought I'd give you guys an example of the work that I did and kind of how I progressed through my chemistry career within MRI Global. And then kind of definitely, you know, for where you guys are sitting right now, how did I get my foot into the door? So as a summer job, high school, I painted houses. My dad helped me out, taught me how to paint houses, learned how to bid jobs, learned how to paint the houses, build the clients. But we did interior, exterior painting in Heston and Gossel and Newton. But all those things are not necessarily applicable to chemistry, but those little things are things like, especially that go on your resume, that can be, it can translate easy into something else in the business world. So college summer job, I worked at a place called Groundwater Technologies in Wichita. It was an analytical shake and bake laboratory that 24-hour turnaround of sample analysis. While I was there, even as a college student, I got to run the FTIR lab. We ran EPA methods, doing liquid-liquid extractions, ran the FTIR, wrote client reports, and then basically left for the day, and you came back and you showed up the next day, and it was exactly the same thing every single day. And that might be what you enjoy, that might not be what you enjoy. Jobs in college, I pretty much worked as a chemistry lab assistant and then also in some of the physics laboratories. When I came to Bethel, I knew I wanted to be in the sciences. My goal was to be a chemical engineer, not really knowing what that meant, and Bethel didn't have that degree, so I thought, well, I'll just try for a triple major of chemistry, physics, and math. That didn't last so long. Especially after DiffEQ, I said, okay, a math minor I'm okay with. So essentially, I graduated with chemistry, physics, and then ended up with a minor. One of the things that probably put my head straight, or where the aha moment was, kind of what Scott was talking about, was going to the Pittsburgh conference. And so when I was a sophomore and when I was a senior, we went with Orvin and a bunch of other college students, and some people took it seriously, some people went there to have a good time. But you got to go to this entire huge technology place and watch what chemistry is really about. I remember sitting in one of the intro meetings, and they were saying, okay, this is what a GC is, this is what an HPLC is, and I'm like, what are you talking about? This isn't chemistry. Yeah, we were in for a rude awakening, but it's something to get yourself out there and figure out what the industry really is about, even if it's just figuring out different types of instrumentation. So that's something I definitely appreciated, and while I was there, I actually went to the job placement office, put my resume out to a bunch of companies in the 5-state local area, and that's actually how I got my job at MRI Global. I was through the job placement office there. So I started July 1, 1997 at MRI Global as an assistant chemist in our surety group. Started with sample prep, started with instrumental analysis, kind of basic little easy instruments. Doing nitric acid digestions, mercury analysis, kind of whatever they threw our way. I worked for 3 years on a big study where we mixed GB, which was a chemical warfare agent, and rocket propellant. The reason we got this contract was back in the 1960s, the U.S. made a bunch of rockets with chemical warfare agents in the warheads. They were trying to dispose of these because they didn't get used. The bad part was the agents in the warheads were leaking and coming in contact with the solid rocket propellant in there. So as they were trying to disassemble these things and incinerate them, they didn't know if it was going to be more or less likely to auto-ignite or blow up and not do something unsafely in this process. So we went through a 3-year-long study trying to characterize this reaction of this GB chemical and this M28 rocket propellant and tried to characterize that. So in that program alone, I basically learned sample extraction, chemical permeation, FTIR, microcalorimetry, GCMS, HPLC. I kind of got introduced to so many different things that, hey, like, oh, I remember seeing these things at PitCon, is kind of getting your interest and getting spooked up. So over the last 10 years, the next 7 to 10 years kind of was, I'd say the post and right around the 9/11 attacks. MRI Global does a lot of defense research. And so if there is something that the country needs to protect itself or something that the country needs, MRI Global kind of adapts and modifies their mission statement to go kind of fit in that area. So we have biologists, we have chemists, we have engineers, we have mathematicians, so we have a lot of different people in the sciences. So in the next 10 years, I worked on air monitoring systems, which helped keep workers safe by checking the breathing air of something that they would do around them. I became a subject matter expert in GCMS and chemical vapor generation. And a lot of the stuff that we did was we tested handheld instruments and sensors, which is still actually very important in today's world. It's about how small can it be and how fast can it be. That's the thing that everybody will throw a ton of money at if you can do it fast. Working through MRI, I became a group leader. And the group I got hired into, started working my way up the management chain. I had opportunities and I managed a chemical analysis laboratory in the Middle East. I became an expert in permeation testing of personal protective equipment. That's PPE. That's something that you chemists definitely should know, or something that a lot of you are wearing right now on your face. It's something to make sure that it works. We do a lot of testing like that. I've done materials compatibility and decontamination testing on a $1 million robotic ring. So I'm sure all you guys out there have seen the Boston Dynamics robot that can jump around and do parkour and all that stuff. The model before that was called Petman, and it was actually a robot that could walk and do all these human-like things, and then it had sensors built into its skin where you could fully dress that up into whatever PPE suit, mask, boots, gloves, anything you want, and it could actually detect if it was in a chemical environment. Same thing of what like a warfighter would do to make sure that nobody's getting exposed. I'd say in the last probably 5 years, I actually have been still working in kind of the air monitoring realm. I had an opportunity to present it to a client, and essentially now I am the inventor of the patent-pending ballistic GC, ballistic gas chromatograph. It's a finalist in the R&D 100 awards. It's going to be awarded in the next couple weeks. The cool thing about that instrument, it can actually collect the sample from the air, throw it onto a GC column, and analyze it, and it'll actually get a result every 30 seconds. So that's kind of the thing, smaller, faster, anything you can do. A lot of people will throw a lot of money at that. My team, I have at work, I have 6 members underneath me. I would say everyone is a bachelor level chemist or lower. I have non-degree people that are working for me. Everybody's extremely good at what they do, and not everybody, and I would say everybody, even though being a chemist or in that field, that everybody has their own little unique experiences or their unique capabilities that they bring to our teams. You know, some people have people that are a little bit better writers, have some people that are better working the wet chemistry, you know, the extractions and the prep work. Have some people that are good with their hands, that like to build things, and whether they're building vapor generation systems. I have people that like, you know, talking to clients and talking to, you know, client. And so I guess the point I'm trying to get across is just because you're a chemist, and these guys said it too, there's so many different areas that it can be. And that's really why I enjoy my work at MRI Global. And I'll even relay that back to, you know, the chemistry labs when I was in college. That's the one part of college I think I truly enjoyed. I didn't like sitting in the classes, sorry, learning, but it was an important step. It builds it, because it's that stuff that you do in the labs. I truly enjoyed that, and that's kind of why I think I found my home at MRI Global, where, you know, you can do a program, and then a couple weeks later you're doing a different program. Really, you get a lot of different experiences, even though it's not necessarily changing jobs.
One thing that I would add on to that is, you know, as you're stepping into a role, each of us had to start out somewhere. Each of us had to start with wet chemistry, sample prep, learning how to write in notebooks and doing that. And it's not always the most fun, it's not always the most glamorous type of things you're doing, but in my opinion, there's no such thing as bad experience. I mean, any experience that you're getting, you know, in the chemistry field, you're going to continue to build onto that. You're going to take it into that next role, that next job that you're doing. When I started out at MRI Global, I was just prepping samples in a lab. From there, I moved into instrumentation, and I started out with UV detectors, things like that. And now I'm up to the point where I'm teaching and training people on time-of-flight instruments, some of the most complicated instrumentation that's out there. And it just basically comes from learning and just gathering and gaining that experience over time. So, keep that in mind.
Did any of our audience members have questions for our panelists?
I'll start, since I'm not shy. So a lot of these students will be out in the world. A lot of these students will be out in the world soon, trying to find a job. The job interview process can be absolutely frightening. You guys have any recommendations? Have you interviewed a lot of people? And I don't know what you're looking for, Eric, in your team. I don't know, I think maybe starting the conversation there would help some of these students, because that's in their near future, hopefully, right? Trying to find a job.
Absolutely. So I will say MRI Global is hiring. So I have business cards, I got koozies, I got pens, I got anything you guys want. So a connection, like these guys talked about, it's just getting your foot in the door and finding somebody, getting a face to that, getting a connection in the door. So I've interviewed a lot of people at MRI Global. I actually went to PitCon in the job placement office to go find people to bring back to MRI Global, which I actually thought was kind of full circle on it. But doing resumes, you know, anything that you can list, any jobs, anything that you can do from your high school job, from your college job, that you were training somebody, that you were managing somebody, that you were you know, documenting something, writing it into a lab notebook, that you were following a procedure that your manager gave you, that you can define what you did. That is exactly what we are looking for when we hire an entry-level chemist. We have entry-level chemist positions, you know, and biologist and microbiologist positions open right now, and it'll actually tell you exactly what are the steps and the requirements of what you need to do. The interview process, I had some difficult interviews, definitely when I was coming through, and I would say I am not an easy person to be interviewed by. I want you to be, professional, confident, and honest. But when you go into that resume or go into that interview, you need to know your resume extremely well, because that is the only thing that me as an interviewer can look. I can read that and I can ask you questions about that. That's the only thing I can do legally. And so you need to know that very well. So you should be able to talk about stories, and you should be able to have spin-offs on every single one of those, about different little scenarios about leadership, about when things didn't go right, or when things went right, or when things went wrong in the laboratory, and how did you fix that? What was the procedure to do? Did you go get your manager? Did you just turn around and walk out the door and leave for the day? You might not want to mention that one. But there's a lot of different things that you can do. Definitely do some research on the company that you're interviewing with. I've had people come in and say, they definitely went to the website and just jotted down a few things, and they asked about that. That's impressive. That means that they're there with a purpose. They want to know about that company. Write down questions to ask at the end of the interview. Don't expect that you're going to remember it. It's good that you're showing and you can have a conversation back and forth. I would say the one thing that probably the three of us up here, we don't have problems talking in front of people. But even if it's difficult, you have to be social with that person that's interviewing you and have a conversation with them. I want to know where your limits are, and I'm going to try to find those in an interview. So just be prepared. Don't get flustered, just be confident and honest.
Two things that I would definitely add on to that is, the first one, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. There's nothing worse than trying to just make up things. When you get asked a question, if you don't know the answer, just saying, I don't know. I'd love to find out more about it. That's always going to be better than trying to make up your own answer when you're asked a question. Another one that I would bring up is anything that you've collaborated with others. I mean, I don't care if you're talking about a lab partner that you had all semester, any type of collaboration that you've worked on, that's always a plus and highlight it. When you step into the world, when you get out there and you start working, you're going to have to work with other members of a team. You're going to have to be held accountable for bringing, meeting your responsibilities on that project that you're working on, and you're also expecting the others on your team to meet that, to meet their expectations. So making sure that you're noting that and, highlighting that in your resume and in that interview process is always going to be a plus. That's definitely with somebody coming out of college. I'm not expecting you to know everything. I'm not expecting you to know every instrumentation. I'm not even necessarily expecting you to know all the things that you would be doing in that role. But what I want to see is, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to work with others and, and have that kind of mentality and mindset? So I think those are important.
I mean, you guys covered most of it. I think I'll take this in a little different angle than that. I think all of you, if you're graduating this year, getting ready to enter into the job market, are in a unique position right now that a lot of other graduates have never had. That means we as in corporate USA or whatever it is, are going to be fighting over you. There is a lot more job opportunities right now than there are people to fill them. So as you go through the process and taking these good practices that these two individuals have encouraged you to do, I would also encourage you to maybe spend some time to reflect on where you think your career path, what path you might want to take. Because right now, you guys have the option to have more than one opportunity, all right? That's unique. It's really unique. It's probably not going to last long, right? The market will correct itself, and then you guys will be fighting over it, and then it's, how do I get my resume known or seen by the hiring manager? That's not a problem right now. If you are on LinkedIn and have a professional profile and you connect with the right people, you will get recruited daily for a job within the scientific field. It is blowing up right now in so many different areas, whether it's defense, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it's environmental, whether it's cannabis. There's all these markets, and they're all they need chemists, microbiologists. They need it. So I would encourage you guys to take some time and just reflect. What do I want to do? Where do I want to be in 5 years, 3 years? And then pursue that because you're gonna have a lot of opportunity right now that you may not have in 2 to 3 years.
My question is,
What's your name, sorry? Go ahead.
my name is Chama.
Chama, all right.
So my question is, so you have both of you have a degree in chemistry. Say for example, say you went to apply for a job, would both of you be, I say, looking for more experience than the degree? I'm not asking whether like when you say experience is more important than the actual degree.
I don't know if I would, I'll answer this and you guys can add on. I don't know if I would ever jump off and say experience is more important than a degree, right?
Oh, sorry. Very great question is that, would you say, so I've gone into this right now.
Yep.
And then I've applied for a job. And I have a degree. Would you be looking at my experience, for example, like doing internships and all the stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah, so definitely experience is going to be very important. I think Eric alluded to that. Even if it's not directly related to the profession in which you're pursuing at that moment, if you can communicate in that interview effectively, you know, you can draw or extrapolate how this experience will impact my ability to carry out this job, right? You'll make an impact on the interview or the hiring manager, right? And so that's where that experience is important. Any experience that you can get, I encourage you guys, if you can find internships. I mean, I had, and I know, I think they still do it, Pfizer just up the road in McPherson. They like young people in college as internships because they can come in and they're gonna train you on the basics, but as soon as you graduate, guess what? They have a pool to hire from that they're already trained. And that's a big advantage to them because it flattens the learning curve. And you're more productive more quickly. That means their return on investment's better, right? So that's where those internships are really important. And it's not just internships, say, in chemistry. You know, if you go out and you're good with computers or programming, or you're a good artist, guess what? Waters is hiring people that have artistic ability to represent scientific mechanisms, right? Within the marketing department. So there's all these opportunities that don't just mean I have to be in the lab or, you know, if you can communicate, if you are motivated and you're willing to work hard, I mean, it's really, there's no end to where you can go, right? I think I was just telling Dwight at the beginning of this that Waters' CEO that just retired about 4 years ago and the president they both were hired on at Waters at an entry-level position as a service engineer, which means they go out and install chromatographic equipment and then train users on how to use it and then repair it. That's how they started their career with Waters. And they retired as the president and CEO. And guess what? Our new wave of leadership at Waters has that same career path right now. So, you know, obviously you guys are just graduating. You do have to temper your, you know, you have to calibrate yourself. I'm not going to be able to go be a CEO or a VP right out of college. You know, so you are going to have to spend some time, you know, in the trenches and build that experience, retain those lessons, and then find ways to apply that and look for the next thing you want to do, whether that's with your current company or moving on to a different company in a different market. So.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit. I would say, like, if you look at a job application of what MRI Global is posting right now, there are positions that are geared towards every 3 to 5 year kind of age bracket. And so an entry-level chemist for us would be like an assistant level. You know, staff or senior, there's basically positions up, and it says you can have a bachelor's degree and you qualify for an assistant. If you have a bachelor's degree and 3 years of experience, relevant experience, and that's your job to say what's relevant, you might get bumped up a level. And so, or you could have a master's. So 3 to 5 years of experience in my company is equivalent to from bachelor's to master's or master's to PhD. So you got to find the right position that's to your capability and to your experience level and your degree level. Everything's important, but it's all a big mishmatch and trying to figure out how you fit in there.
I mean, what you'll find in a lot of positions is it's a lot easier for me to teach somebody fresh than to take somebody that has previous experience and unlearn everything that they were doing at their previous job and then start doing the things in there. So, you know, not having specific experience, you know, doing something in that position is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, you're an entry-level person, you're coming out of college, we expect that. You know, kind of like I said earlier, we don't expect the folks that are coming out of college to know everything that they need to know. I mean, we're there to train them. We want to, you know, build their experience within the company. So, yeah, there's a, you know, relevant experience, you know, internships, those things are all great, but I mean, they're not necessarily a deal breaker if you don't have them. When I graduated from here, I worked as a lab assistant and played football, and then worked at a restaurant, you know, and I had all of those things on my resume. And what I really wanted to try to focus on, because I didn't have that chemistry experience, is the experiences that, you know, I had as a server, the experience I had in playing football and having to work with the team, having to deal with adversity and things like that. So those are all things that you want to be able to sell yourself on in your resume and, you know, in the interview process.
Hey, my name's Caleb. I'm a junior right now in Biosensors. So whenever you're going through projects in the workplace and they fail entirely and you have to start from scratch, how do you deal with that, and how does your team react to that whenever it's just a complete flop in certain direction?
You've never been a failure, right?
Failures are your best opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's no better experience than a failure as long as you get up, right? I would say in the professional world, I don't know about the academic, but in the professional, if it's a complete flop as you described, you might want to update your resume. You know, I mean, there are consequences to that, and normally if something is a complete failure, that's probably a result of poor planning, right? And not spending enough time maybe reflecting on or identifying proactively what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve it. So, but coming back, in a complete failure, never just move on. You know, at some point you should step back, look at that failure from a high level, and see what you could have done different, and make sure you learn from it. Some of my biggest failures in my professional career have been my biggest stepping stones to get to the next level. So,
a good story about a failure for me, and Eric can actually attest to this one because I was one of the folks that worked with him in one of these labs overseas. They hired me on because they said they wanted somebody that could run an LCMS, and that stands for liquid chromatography mass spectrometer. At that time, I knew how to do the LC side of it, but I'd never ran an MS system. So I remember in that interview, I said, well, you know, I don't know what an MS is, but if all I have to do is tell you if there's a peak there or not, yeah, sure, I can do this. No problem, I got it. And so I was out there, and we're running this instrument, and it breaks. It just stops working. And we couldn't figure out what was going on with it. We had to send this thing to a different country, get it repaired, have it sent back. And as I'm talking to the folks that did the repair, they were like, have you ever cleaned this instrument? Did you ever do any cleaning on the EMS? And I was like, I did not know I was supposed to clean this thing. And so it was like one of the most eye-opening things. And what I told myself after I got back from that deployment, I said I would never be in a position in which I did not know how to operate a system. I was going to do everything that I could to make sure that I was the best prepared the next time that something like this came up. And within, I think, 2, maybe 3 years of that, I ended up in a role where I was training the staff that were going overseas to operate these instruments. So I was now in a position where I was teaching them how to run these systems. And now I've transitioned that experience into now I work for Waters, and I get to train customers all over the country on how to run these systems. So, you know, I mean, it depends on the type of failure. You know, if you're running a $1 million project and you said it could do X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't do X, Y, and Z, that's gonna be tough. That's gonna be a tough one to spin. You know, but there are times that, you know, you had expectations that you wanted to meet and, you know, you didn't get there. And you have to look and evaluate, you know, just like Scott said, you know, what do I need to do different in order to do that? Or is there something that I still gained from this? Maybe it didn't get the Z part of the X and Y, but I did get the X and Y. So what can I do to build on those two parts of, you know, the overall project to keep things going? So, you know, just always keep that in mind, because yeah, things aren't always going to go the way you want.
Yeah, I'd say in government contract research, you ask for more money. And that's a little bit serious than that, but there's a lot of times that projects that we bid, or, you know, they put out a request for proposal, it's to push the limits of science and to push the limits of what's out there and availability. We bid on, whether it's DARPA or all these crazy projects, and like, here's your criteria of what you can meet, this is your goal. And you look at that like, there's no way you can do that. Like, well, we can try this and try this and try this. So you come up with a game plan of what you're gonna attack, you propose it, and maybe you get it funded. And so you try that, and essentially you're growing, and the goal of a lot of those projects are not to be successful, like 100% successful. It's to push the limits of what's out there right now and to push, you know, make you think outside the box a little bit. Because I would say that's the one thing that I enjoy doing the most, and I think MRI Global does well, is, you know, we solve difficult problems. Nobody comes to us and says, hey, can you, I want you to fix this right here. I'm like, well, no, we're going to be too expensive for that. But if you want us to redesign it or do, you know, do a bunch of things to it, it's the difficult problems that are the fun ones. And then once you start doing that, and, you know, and really, even though it's a big problem, no, you just break it up into little ones. You solve this problem, and then pretty soon you've solved the whole problem. So, good question.
Can you talk about there, so directly joining the workforce from undergrad or going to grad school?
Yeah, so for me, in the position that I was in at the time, in my family, there was only one person that had graduated before me, and that was my grandmother, and she graduated the week before I did. So in my family, my parents were like, go to college, go to college, go to college. So I went to college, did the college thing, got my degree, and I was like, wait, there's more stuff after this that I could have did? And I was like, no way, I want to go make money. You know, honestly, it really is just going to depend on where you are. I would never tell anybody to go get a degree beyond a bachelor's if they didn't feel they were ready. I mean, it is a very tough thing to do. It's a very competitive area to be in. Some of the training that I do, I'm working with graduate students, and I mean, I dread doing those trainings because those people don't ever go home. It'll be 7:30 at night, and I'm still in the lab with them. I'm like, you guys eat dinner? Do you do anything? You know, so it's a really tough thing to do. But at the same time, I think that, you know, Eric kind of explained it earlier, is that, you know, if I have that master's, that puts me that much further ahead as I step into the professional world. If I have that PhD, that puts me that much further. But once you start building that experience, what you'll see on a lot of those resumes, it'll say a PhD or X number of years of experience. You know, but I think that if you feel that, you know, graduate degree is something you should go and do, definitely do it. It is going to be a very beneficial thing, but it doesn't mean that you won't be successful if you don't have it.
Yeah, and I'll add, if you're a master's or PhD, it's going to change what a company is going to use you to do.
Yeah.
And so at a master's level, you might jump right into be like more of a task leader, as opposed to a bachelor might be doing the prep where they're going to work up to a task leader. A PhD might come in and be the program manager right away, or the task leader might have to go 3 to 4 years of being that type of leadership role where they're going to jump in. PhDs, that they're not going to pay you to do wet chemistry in the hoods. That you're too expensive for that. They need you to bring in some dollars. But at the same time, if that's what you want to do, that's great. For me, you know, I was ready to get into the workforce, and I was done studying for a while, and my goal was always to go back to school. MRI Global actually has we're on the UMKC campus up in Kansas City, and there actually, you can go get a degree that towards the work that you're doing, and MRI Global will pay for that. I enjoyed work too much that I never even pursued that, but it's definitely always an option. But I had one program a couple years ago where, and I just have a bachelor's, so I came into a program and I was sitting with a PhD doctor from University of Colorado, Denver, and we're sitting in a meeting, and the lady looks at me and says, "Where did you get your PhD from, and what's it in?" I'm like, "Well, I just have a bachelor's in Bethel College." I totally took her back, because I knew more than everybody else at that table about the project work that we were doing. Experience is valid, but education is good too.
Today at Torpor, we talked a little bit about identity and knowing who you are. So did all three of you know who you were before entering into your careers? Or if not, how has that evolved over the years?
Go ahead.
I don't even know who I am right now. I do have, yeah, I know, I do have a kind of a funny story that helped identify who I was. I was in lab, love lab, like Eric said. We were over in the old science hall. And Richard, I used to call him Rich, I think he hated it, but we're in the lab, and it was my senior year, and he's like, "Scott, what are you gonna do?" And I go, "I think I'm gonna go get my PhD, Richard, or Rich." And he kind of stepped back, and he goes, "Scott, you'd make a really good lab manager." So my point there is that sometimes you think you know what you want to do, and listening to other people's perspective, or maybe in this case, Rich had a pretty good idea of my academic skill set, that he directed me in a different direction. So, but I think, you do hear a lot about identity now. I would encourage you maybe not to spend so much time right now trying to figure out just who or what you are, because as you go and experience all these different things, you'll find what you enjoy, right? And then as you pursue that and you develop expertise in that area, you will develop a passion for that area. And you will earn that passion in that. And through that, you start to identify who you are. Mine, I'm a dad. I have 8 kids. That's my passion, right? So I love kids. I love fooling around. And luckily for me, I'm able to work for a very innovative company in Waters Corporation within the field of mass spectrometry in a little tiny town in the middle of Kansas. And so I would have never got there if I just would have picked a path and stuck to it. I think it's always good to bring your head up, look around, look at your opportunities, expand that network, understand what's going on and what you can do, and that will help you maybe figure out your identity in the long run.
And I mean, even to kind of build on that, earlier I kind of said that there is no such thing as bad experience, and that's what you just said there in your question is one of the reasons why I say that, is, that experience says, I know what I don't want to do now. That's a part of building that identity and just gaining those types of experiences. I mean, I remember we were in the process of trying to purchase a time of flight instrument at MRI Global, and Scott came in his fancy suit and sold us this instrument, and I looked at it, I was like, man, I like the way that, he's sitting there and he's interacting with customers and he's building these relationships. I'd love to get in a job where I can do something like that. And that's how I ended up in the role that I'm in now. It is gaining and seeing what other opportunities are out there. So, what your identity is today is, a bench chemist in the lab, making samples. That may not be who you are 2 years from now. It may not be who you are 5 years from now. So, just always be flexible in trying to determine those things. I thought somebody, I think, had their hand up.
Is this why you left? Because you had a nice suit? That's
that's right. This is really nice.
So I would say, knowing your identity, anything that you do, don't get complacent with what you're doing. So just because you're doing one little job, master that job, do the best of your ability, do it, and where no one else can do it better than you, and then move on. Go to the next thing, train somebody else. They'll be so happy that you gave them that job. Wow, this person's awesome to train me in it, and take a next step up. Don't ever be comfortable with being comfortable. Don't get in your comfort zone. Change is okay. And that is how you work up in a company, and that is how you grow as an individual. How you react to change, that's up to you. You could go, oh no, my gosh, I'm gonna have to do a new job now. No, not necessarily. It's an opportunity for you to better yourself. But I'll say along with that, anything you're doing, attitude along the way is everything. Be open to every single thing that you can do, and try it with 100%, and maybe it's not what you like. So be it. But just do everything 100%.
My name is Leah. You guys spoke about networking throughout the presentation, and I'm not going into you guys' particular field, but I do think that networking is important. My question is, at this age, would you treat every chance to network, every interaction as a chance to network, or would you just treat everybody, as someone that might be able to get you somewhere in life? Would you treat it like that or no?
I think I know what you're asking here. So, yeah, your motive shouldn't be simply, how do I get this person to like me to get a job, right? I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Networking is getting to know the person across the table from you. You just have a conversation. Hey, what are you doing? What's your field? You find out that they're a team member at MRI Global. Oh, what do? You start asking questions. You find some common ground. Just make conversation, get to know them, right? And through that, now there's a point of contact. And so now the next time maybe Eric is thinking about trying to find someone to hire, he has a point of relativity. Hey, I knew this person, they made an impression on me. Worthwhile to take a look at the resume and bring them in for a conversation. I will say within my position, my responsibility is covering a large geography and going in and talking to all different levels within the company. And in doing that, I find, it's pretty obvious pretty quick, the really talented young chemists that are that are there. And it's everything Eric and Otis have said in terms of the traits and the characteristics. And I will actively go and introduce myself to them, because I know that probably in a year or 2 years, Waters is going to need to hire someone. And if I meet someone that my immediate thought is, man, they'd be better on my team than on the other side, I'm gonna reach out to them and try to make them a part of the team, right? So that's where I'm coming from, networking, just getting to know, point of contact, expand that network. And honestly, when you do that, you're gonna start again trying to, oh man, I had no idea I could have a chemistry degree and go into marketing and focus maybe on, the artistic part of that, right? I mean, there's all these different avenues that you can go through, but you don't really know that until you go out and get to know a lot of different people from a lot of different professions.
Yes.
Yeah. I concur.
In the interest in time for transitioning for our next speaker, I'd like to thank our panelists one last time. I'm sure they would be happy to talk with you some more individually.
I encourage you to look us all up on LinkedIn. He's hiring, we're hiring. We'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn and start that network.
Yeah, absolutely. And there'll be koozies and pens out front.
I'll be right there.
3 cups would give me a heart attack. So I've got that energy bar in my house.
Yes, I liked it. And he made sure to broadcast. He was hiring koozies. He might get people with the koozies. I'm in psychology. It's science, honey. Not necessarily loud. That's what is in I am, yes. I am, but I sprained my ankle like 2 weeks ago. And I just got off the book on Monday, and I'll still be in it for a couple more weeks. But the way that it planned out because of the complication I have from having children, I still have ongoing symptoms like high heart rate right now.
So you're staying
Don't necessarily play. I don't play. Like, I don't play JV. And yes, it was so, yes, I am. Wow. I'm okay. Honestly, I'm okay. Just put the best people on the court. I know, because I know I'm a whole lot slower than last year after being COVID. And I have COVID to do that, but yeah. Yeah. It's okay. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The atmosphere. The atmosphere is a million times better than last year. I like practices. Okay. Well, I have to go see Chris for this. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, they got a bald ass head over here. He's a shit.
You did a great job.
Well, you guys looking pretty important. I better give you the two. You intend to? Yeah, I'm gonna stay for Pablo's. Okay. Anybody want a koozie?
Okay.
Which would you like?
It's about 2 o'clock now, so we'll transition into our next session. So I have the pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Pablo Ceres. Pablo was born and raised in Pamplona, Spain. He was drawn to Bethel College initially because of the soccer program and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Chemistry and German in 1999. During his time at Bethel, he fell in love with functional and structural biochemical characterization of macromolecules in research. After his time in North Newton, he investigated virus capsid assembly at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. During his time there, he completed a master's in biochemistry and molecular biology. In 2006, Pablo moved to Boulder, Colorado to experience what life may be away from the plains and to pursue a PhD at the University of Colorado. His dissertation focused on bacterial genetic regulation via riboswitches and how to manipulate them to create novel nanosensors. Pablo then joined the corporate world and worked in the research and development team at Soma, still in beautiful Boulder, Colorado, where he was able to use his expertise in protein and nucleic acid chemistry. During his time at Soma, Pablo helped solidify and expand proteomic platform capability of monitoring 7,000 proteins with a drop of blood. He then made a move to, lost my spot. He then made a move to develop next generation sequencing assays at Archer DX, where he is currently as a part of the process development team. Pablo currently supports all oncology product activities in scientific manner and ensures proper function. When he's not dealing with chemistry, Pablo has always found time to coach soccer. Pablo is married to Anna Brubaker, also a Bethel graduate. They live in Boulder, Colorado with their two daughters, Ellie and Grace. Please join me in welcoming Pablo.
Wow. It is such a treat to be here. Scott and Eric and Otis, what a great little panel you guys put together. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and thank you for being here. I actually can't believe that I'm here, standing up here. I used to be a student not that long ago. What it seems to me like it wasn't that long ago. I understand that for you guys it's probably, double your age. So yes, it is a long time for you. Graduated in 1999 with a chemistry degree and a German degree, coming from Spain to a little small town in Kansas. Boy, was I scared when I started coming over here. Showed up with 2 suitcases. They were big, but just 2, and here I am. Okay, so what I would like to do today is give you a little bit of my pathway into how I became a scientist, what I did, what I didn't do, all of that. I don't want this to be a boring talk, so if something is not clear, just raise your hand and ask me a question. It'll be great. Although I had my fair share of good fortune in studying and degree pursuing, I think I would define myself as a fair student at Bethel College. I don't think I was a great student. Always tried, I just couldn't quite get it done. So thank you to all the professors for all your patience towards me and towards a lot of the students. What Scott said about being in an interesting and important university here at Bethel is that your professors really take an interest in you and that their success is your success. And the other way around. It's commingled and it's such a neat opportunity that you guys have in front of you, so don't waste it. Thank you to all the professors. Thank you, Dwight, for the invitation to be here to talk about talk about my research. Meryl Schleiba was instrumental in my getting a German major. When I arrived into Bethel, I knew 0 German. I was from Spain, not quite the same. And of course, Jerry Sieber, who was the soccer coach here at the time, who recruited me, and I was lucky enough to come in, visit the campus, loved it, and
was able to also hang out with some of the soccer guys at the soccer house at the time. And that was certainly fun. So many other professors. I still remember coming to the fine arts, which it wasn't my thing, but I did come to the fine arts for religion classes that were outstanding. I still remember some of those trains of thoughts and discussions at times. Physics professors, biology professors, Dwight, so many others that I'm not going to remember, so I won't mention more names because I'll forget somebody. But certainly, Richard, thank you so much for everything you've done. Thank you, yes. I still remember to this day, 20 years later, 20 plus years later after leaving Bethel College, how instrumental you were in me being able to finish some of the classes. You were a great professor, great mentor. I know you're a great farmer as well, and I know how important that is here in Central Kansas. One thing I wanted to talk about is the different chemistry classes that Richard taught. Chemistry 2, environmental chemistry, physical chemistry, advanced inorganic. Wow, that's quite a feat to be able to teach all of those. So how much you had to relearn, I'm sure, was challenging, and we certainly appreciate it. One more challenge to that equation was that our class, the class that I graduated, I was a year older than Scott, so we were slightly off in the cycles. So I don't think Scott was in some of these classes, but our class had pretty numerous number of students. There were like 8 of us, which is big for a chemistry class, and we had 2 or so kids from Wichita, from the Wichita area. Your nephew was in the class, which was such a treat because he was so smart. He runs in the family for sure. But then we had people from Lebanon. Zaina was there. Zaina will be here tomorrow. We had people from Cameroon. Roland was there. We had Japanese, Palestine, and then I was there from Spain, and maybe somebody else from Europe, I believe. But the funny thing about our class was that it was almost like a UN, but one time in one of the difficult labs where things just didn't seem to quite be working, Richard just said, oh, just put it all away and let's go have a soda. So we did. We just put everything away and went and had a soda, so that was fantastic. I remember how chaotic those labs were and how Richard just sat steady and just got things done, just like a Kansas farmer would do. So it was just very, very, such a mentoring environment, I think. And on top of that, some of these classes that are extremely theory-based, advanced inorganic, probably one of the most. Richard would just continue to talk and talk, and you were able to maybe grasp a couple of concepts here and there. A lot of those classes were at 8 in the morning, so that was another challenge for sure. All right. I want to talk to you about my stops in my career. Please ask questions if something is not clear, and we'll just get through this talk. If things get a little bit long, we can shorten certain topics. So my first stop was in Oklahoma City, at the University of Oklahoma at the Health Sciences Center. We studied the thermodynamic properties and structure details of hepatitis B virus capsid assembly. You may have heard of the war virus lately, and it was, again, one of those opportunities in which you have a nice system to learn from, and as the panel mentioned earlier, when you put effort into something and then you can take it with your ideas, it's a fantastic thing to do. So we learned how the subunit that comes together in hepatitis B virus is composed of 2 dimers. So there's one dimer here and an identical copy of it just opposed to it that then form a nice homodimer, homo meaning the same unit coming together for a homodimer, which is held together by a disulfide bond here. Disulfide bonds is a covalent bond that happens between two amino acids in the protein capsid. Then 149, excuse me, this is composed of 149 amino acids, and they come together to form a full capsid. And this is what protects the genetic material of a virus. Obviously, the formation of this capsid is very important for the function of the virus. Well, not only you get to understand how this interaction occurs and how this reaction occurs, but you also get to learn things about, boy, this doesn't look as good as in my computer, I apologize. You get to look at the fact that all of these subunits come together and form different axes of symmetry. So, for example, you have these two dimers coming together in a threefold symmetry. So you see this unit repeated here and here, and so it's a threefold. And then you have two folds of symmetry between this side and this opposite side that is not represented here, and so on. But the bottom line is that whether this capsid comes together fast or slow, or how resistant it is to change, it is important to see how the virus can enter a cell and can be taken apart to then be able to inject the genetic material to then infect the next cell. Just a highlight of the laboratory techniques that I was able to learn during this. It was a whole lot, 6 years, which was more than you would think that it would take to learn some of these. But I was able to do some protein expression in bacteria, very important in a lot of labs. Then be able to purify those proteins, chromatography that was mentioned earlier. I used a lot of size exclusion and ion exchange, biophysical characterization of proteins, X-ray crystallography, electron microscopy, circular dichroism, etc., etc. But I think what I learned the most in this first 6 years in my career was to be able to analyze and report scientific data. Now, this may seem like an obvious thing to learn, but it's not an obvious thing to do. And so how you talk to different people and how you explain what you do to different people is so important. If you have a client that does certain things, you'll go deep into the scientific reasoning behind certain aspects of what you do. But if you're talking to a QA person, well, you're just gonna give them the details that they need to know so that you can explain and get your message across, but you're certainly not gonna go and describe every single protein interaction and how the amino acids come together and what kind of surface gets buried to then release water molecules, etc. But one thing that I think is important, and it was mentioned earlier, is to have the curiosity to ask questions. And that's what I did during this time, and develop a new theory in which we thought that from this step, so from a subunit into the full capsid, there was a conformational change of the protein from inactive protein to active protein. So our hypothesis was to lock this structure somehow, so then it wouldn't be able to go from the transport from the conformational change into the active form. And so we were able to obtain a construct of the protein in which, I'm going the wrong way, sorry, in which we locked these two sites of the protein. We engineer a disulfide bond, so we mutated the amino acids into cysteines to be able to form a disulfide bond. And my boss actually let me run with that. I was an undergraduate student with 2 years of experience, and he allowed me to pursue that field, that study. Although we were incorrect in saying that it would work, it was one of the most fun projects that I've had in a long time. After 6 years, I moved to Colorado and then studied bacterial genetic regulation mechanism and specific mechanism of it, which is called riboswitches. And not only was I able to study it and be able to come up with some important interactions and some important ramifications from the function of the riboswitches, but also use them to develop cellular biosensors. So this is going to be a little bit of the meat and potatoes of the talk. This is going to be a little bit of where the science lives, but if you get bored, if you are like me and you struggle sometimes to get through chemistry 2 or a talk, you can, in my opinion, you can get up and just lean against the wall. This is what I do in meetings when I get bored, and just be able to survive it somehow. So the function of RNA expands beyond the original hypothesis because, as we know, the genetic material is stored in a DNA form, which then is transcribed into the RNA, which carries the information to translate into, translate into proteins. Yeah, I said that right. And it's the protein that performs a lot of the actions of the cell. We have transport proteins. We have different proteins that perform each function of the cell, in the cell. And that's all fine and good. But we know that we have a little bit of a problem because while DNA has all the genetic information, only 2% of the human genome codes for proteins. Well, that's interesting. Why do we have only 2% of it? Okay, so if it's only 2%, if we transcribe that DNA into RNA, we're good, right? Well, how come then we have 80% of the genomic DNA be transcribed? What is it doing? If we only need 2%, why are we taking this step? What's going on there? Well, starting RNA activity will help explain the importance of non-coding RNA regions, and a good model system would be bacteria. So let me just give you a couple of examples, and I won't go too long on these because they just sort of take away from the talk. But non-coding RNAs can control the fate of mRNAs. So we have a DNA represented here in this slide, in which from which we obtain an mRNA, where the transcription starts here. We have a Scheindel-Garno, that's where site in which the ribosome will bind to then translate the protein from the mRNA. We have interactions of RNAs that may block the starting of the transcription of this, translation of this mRNA, or we have other RNases that can block certain actions of the mRNA to then be degraded, for this mRNA to be degraded by RNases. Other example of how other proteins can bind mRNAs and vary gene expression by the classic tryptophan RNA binding protein. You have a transcribed mRNA in the absence of tryptophan. An anti-termination stem cell is folded and the transcription can continue. However, when the tryptophan is present, there is a conformational change that happens after binding of the mRNA. So the mRNA binds the protein, and then that translates into a conformational change of the mRNA, forming a terminator stem in which the multi-U, the poly-U region stalls the polymerase, and therefore the transcription is stopped. So I'm just giving you 2 examples. There are multiple more, but what we can say is that although this is the original central dogma of DNA, in which we've already established how the genomic genomic information is covered. However, we just know that there's all kinds of interaction between protein and DNAs and RNAs that then have interactions with proteins, and so on and so on. So my point is this is why it's important to study mRNA regulation, and this is what we're going to do here. So we have the example of riboswitches and how they can sense chemical change and control genetic expression. So the example of riboswitches is very simple. A riboswitch is part of an mRNA. They're well represented in bacteria, and they're composed of two domains, the aptamer domain and the expression platform, represented in two different colors. When this mRNA is transcribed, it can assess the presence or absence of ligand. If the ligand is present, the aptamer domain undergoes a conformational change, and after binding the ligand, which correlates to a terminator stem loop formed in the expression platform, which then terminates the transcription of this mRNA. Therefore, we stopped the genetic information at that time. This is done with no protein assistance, so it's all the interaction between the ligand and the mRNA. And the genes that are controlled by this mechanism are important in transport or biogenesis of a cellular metabolite. What that means is that if we have protein or ligand X in the cell, we do not need it anymore. So we're going to stop the production of it from the beginning, or we're going to impede the transport of that ligand into the cell. Riboswitches can control transcription, translation, and splicing, but we are going to focus today on the transcriptional regulators. Riboswitches are well represented in bacteria, and they can form, they can sense different metabolites. I'm just representing some here. B12 can be bound by mRNAs, FMN, lysine, amino acid, adenine, which is a base, and S-adenosine important in cell metabolism. And there are certainly different kinds of riboswitches, 25 or more by now, and in some bacteria, like in Biosensors, there are approximately 4% of the genes controlled by this mechanism. If we look at how well they're represented in bacteria, we can see that in firmicutes, which is where Biosensors falls in, we have a well-represented and different riboswitches in this bacteria. Riboswitches characterization has primarily focused on the aptamer domain, which is what binds the ligand. We have solved crystal structures of them. We know how the secondary fold happens. We've done phylogeny studies in which we know which region pairs with what region in the RNA, and we can see in very good detail how the ligand interacts with the basis of the riboswitch. So this is all fine and good, and it's very interesting, and it's very important to characterize these interactions. But one thing that we do not know is how well and how the ligand binding is translated into the expression domain. And so, we've done all of these studies in this domain, but not so much in this domain. So that's what I focused on in my in my thesis, and we just did that by looking at how the expression platform dictates the expression of the gene. So for a transcriptional repressor, which is what is represented here, as the mRNA is being transcribed, when the aptamer domain is transcribed, it has the ability to either sense a ligand and then correlate with a conformational change of the expression platform, turns the gene off, or in the absence of that ligand, the gene is transcribed. And all of this is done as the mRNA is being transcribed, so not a lot of time. We were able to develop a new method in the lab. Other people had used it, but not in the lab. So I was tasked with looking at how to do this single turnover in vitro transcription assay. So obtain the, the template of interest with whatever mRNA we were looking at, investigating, and we added the polymerase in the picture here. As the polymerase transcribed the gene, it stopped at the multi-U region. Obviously, since this is DNA, in this case, we were representing them with T's, and either terminate the transcription, or if the ligand is present, or in the absence of the ligand, we were able to transcribe the entire gene, in this case, the entire transcript that we have here. So we were able to separate these two processes, these two species, in a gel electrophoresis, and a normal gel would look like this, in which we are looking at the composition of the read-through of the gene, or the transcription, or the terminated process. So again, we can, as the ligand concentration increases, we are terminating the transcript early, and we're not reading through, right? Smaller pieces travel faster in gel, and therefore we see them at the bottom of the gel. Bigger species are at the top of the gel because they don't travel as fast. We can then quantify this data and fit it to a two-state model, and the normal data that we obtain looks like something like this, as we are plotting the percent terminated product as a function of the ligand. So again, as the ligand increases, the termination increases. And we can look at different processes or different terms within this graph, the range or the T50, which is the concentration at which, concentration of ligand at which half of the response of this particular riboswitch is obtained. So then the next thing is to choose a good system. And in our case, we wanted to see something that was well represented in phylogeny. We wanted to make sure that it was a general mechanism. So again, the mechanism that we were describing, and that it was well described and well known how the interactions occurred and how the phylogeny of it was established, and that it would function in vitro. And we were able to look at that. So we chose a MET-E riboswitch from Biosensors, and we just looked at if it was important or not during the metabolism of sulfate. And it is. It's represented here, and it is an enzyme in which it converts homocysteine into methionine in the sulfate pathway. Again, a lot of details to then get to something that look good. Here's a normal representation of our studies. The MET riboswitch in wild type would look like something like this. You see that the response is less than what I just showed you. So you start with 80%, 70% terminated, and then it increases to about 90 or so percent terminated. But the concentration of, needed is kind of high. So this is all fine and good, and we also saw that when mutating this residue, U157 to A, so right here, this U from a U to an A, we are interacting, we are breaking these two bonds, and therefore it's inactive, does not respond to the presence or absence of SAM. It's transcribed in the same manner. So again, a good way to see that your controls are working, meaning if it's not binding SAM, it's transcribing the same way. And we were able to study different regions of the aptamer domain. We saw that if changing certain residues, we obtain a much better responder to SAM, which is the ligand of this riboswitch. And we were also able to study the kink turns and whatnot. And everybody has the same studies in their PhD thesis. They go through a system, they mutate every residue, and they tell you how important those residues are for function. Yes, turns out that you do need a residue, right? You do need this residue for the ribosomes to interact with SAM. Yes, that's important. And we were able to look at different interactions and different elements. I didn't show any data here for this, right? So, not important for this talk. But what was important is to go to the next step, which was to develop novel biosensors. How did we do that? We looked at the fact that natural aptamers, if they have the same sort of mechanism, could be swapped, meaning I just represented the same binding riboswitch, the same binding aptamer with a different color. Here I'm just representing it with a different color. This is a different riboswitch aptamer domain, is XPT, which binds guanine. And so we were able to translate this aptamer domain into this MED-E expression platform. So with this construct, we have MED-E wild type. We already looked at that. If we have this construct, XPT MED-E, against SAM, we see that there's no change in transcription. However, when we add guanine instead of the SAM, we see a change in the transcription. So we were able to make a chimeric riboswitch, a Franken switch, whatever you want to call it. And that was kind of interesting. And so we said, the next step would be, could we mix and match all kinds of aptamer domains and expression platforms? So we had a lysine binding riboswitch, which is an amino acid, with the same expression platform, and so again the MED-E, which is a SAM binding riboswitch, and the XPT that I just showed you, which is a guanine binding riboswitch. The answer is yes. I'm just giving you the short version. I'm not going to show you 300 gels, but the bottom line is that we were able to make all kinds of swaps in between. So that was great, regardless of whether they bound SAM or lysine or guanine or whatever it was. So that was great. We're pretty excited about it. But there was one more step that we wanted to demonstrate, and that was whether or not a chimeric riboswitch could function with a synthetic aptamer. So I skipped over this detail, and it's the fact that aptamers can be synthetically obtained, just a process of enrichment from a library pool of RNA sequences, DNA sequences. We make a pressure into this pool to then obtain what we want, right? Usually you bind whatever it is that you're interested in, and you enrich the regions, the sequences that are looking for the function that you want. So what we chose was to put together expression platforms with the theophylline aptamer. And I don't have a ton of time to tell you what theophylline is and so on, but it's a molecule that resembles caffeine. And it's basically a golden standard in this field. So we were able to plug and play with the theophylline aptamer, and we obtained 3 different bindings, different chimeric riboswitches. Theophylline in EJ, which is a SAM binding aptamer expression platform, theophylline in MED-E, and theophylline in lysine, which is a lysine binding riboswitch. So that was good. Again, usually in academia, you continue to take steps and steps. So the next step is whether or not these could function in vivo. They're functioning in vitro, but can they function in vivo? And I'm here to tell you, yes, they can. So what we did was we have a promoter in a DNA sequences. We have our riboswitch, and then we have a reporter gene of green fluorescence protein under UV light. Our vector system is not active in either one of them. This is no theophylline present and then theophylline present. we have a rival switch of choice, in this case, theophylline MME, that is expressing the protein in the absence of theophylline, but is not expressing the protein in the presence of theophylline, and then a mutant that does not bind the ligand is active in both. So again, negative control here and a positive control here as well. So we thought that this was pretty cool, but when I presented this at CU, we were kind of ecstatic when a Nobel laureate expressed his approval, and he said, that's cool. That was a good day. That was a good day for us. So just I'll leave you with this, that this expert in the matter said in his paper. This is just a review, and he said that metabolic engineering will soon rival and potentially eclipse synthetic organic chemistry, which I thought was very interesting. So what we would try to convince the audience is that the chimeric riboswitches can serve for new avenues in engineering of different pathways and so on. I would say that that was all fine and good, but it was time now to join the real world and to join the corporate world of America, as we heard earlier. And so I was able to join Soma Logic, in which we used slow off-rate modified aptamers. So it was a nice transition for me from aptamer work to sort of working with aptamers to obtain different processes. And in this case, it was called the Soma Scan Assay, which is a great tool for biomarker discovery. And what the aim of this company is to early diagnose illnesses to have better prognosis for patients. And products that they are studying are RA, rheumatic arthritis, lupus, inflammation, heart pathologies, and diabetes. I have a diagram of how their assay works. It's going to take a little time to get through it, so I'm going to skip because we're running kind of tight on time, I think. Yes, I'm going to skip over it. We can come back if somebody's super interested in it. Let me just tell you what I learned in this job. A new assay. This assay is not easy, many steps. To be able to transfer a manual assay into an automated platform is not simple, and the throughput manually is a lot of work. And usually robots are a lot more, they tend to perform a lot better than people, and they're not cranky, and they're not tired, and they don't have to go home to pick up their kids, and so on and so on. So doing that was definitely worth the effort. So another thing that we did was to increase the probe menu, so how many somomers were used, how many proteins could be monitored with a drop of blood. We started with 2,500, we increased it to 5,000, and then 7,000. I thought it was quite an achievement. Of course, this is not just my work, this is a whole team of people. How to interact with third-party vendors. That's an interesting way to make sure that other people know what you know, and how to describe the process, and how to communicate with engineers, and how to tell them about how important certain properties and certain steps in the assay are, and so on. And also information transfer internally from the same company. Now, this is all great, and we are just sitting there. I was at Soma Logic for almost 6 years, and everything wasn't going groovy, and we were increasing the menu size from 2,500 to 7,000. I mean, things were cooking, and we were cruising. Things are going well. Well, one day I get called into an office, and the layoffs are happening. Just like that. Just like that. We did a fantastic job, and then layoffs happened. Why? Well, because the assay got to where they needed to be, and they didn't need any more R&D work, so they laid off a lot of the R&D. This is a business decision. This is not personal and does not reflect on your work. I can sit here and say that now, 2 years later, but at the time, it wasn't fun. If you think that flunking a chemistry test is a bit of a disaster, imagine what this is. So we got our big pens on and started working on how to get the new job because life was still happening. People here were mentioning about networking. Well, I'm not at the time of our schooling, it wasn't so much called networking, it was just called talking to people. At my time at Bethel, we didn't have these things that, although are super useful, they get in the way. We were able, when I was in grad school, to walk through somebody else's lab and talk to people and ask, what are you working on? What are you struggling with? And what's working? And what's not working? And why? And how's your PI taking it? And so on. I made some really good friends during grad school, and this was, it was some work, but it was fun. It was fun to know about what other people were doing in their projects. And so I was able to interview with Archer DX, in which I had many friends, and I was able to obtain a job in something that, one, I was not an expert in, I was not the best candidate, and I had a huge learning curve to overcome. It's all doable, you just gotta get your mind to it and get it done. What certainly did intrigue me about Archer, it was first called Archer, then it was bought by Invita, and so that's why I'm doing both. Their mission was to democratize personalized medicine. They're not just wanting personalized medicine, they're wanting to democratize it, make it public, make it for everybody. And so it's a process by which, with the help of next generation sequencing, products can then determine what our oncogenic product can determine what mutation a cancer patient has, and so the patient can undertake the right therapy right away instead of wasting time with different treatments. So our work is basically to support the submission of these products to the FDA for approval as diagnostic tools. Again, for the, because we're running a little late, I'm gonna just skip over this. The anchor multiplex chemistry that they defined and developed sort of goes through a lot of steps with DNA that is extracted from tissues, in which we obtain different primers, and we incorporate different barcodes to then obtain a sequence that makes sense, and that in which the noise of the PCR products can be reduced. And then what the really goal is to get to a personalized medicine in 2030, in which we can go through individualized MRD, minimal residual disease, that examines an individual patient's cells to determine the potential for recurrence, and so on. In my current position, I am a product sustaining manager. I oversee the production of the product. We have one product that is in the market in Japan, and while that's great to be able to help patients, it takes a lot of work to make sure that we can do that. So my job function usually takes me to talk to people from quality assurance, quality control, manufacturing, regulatory affairs, supply chain, inventory, receiving, logistics, operations, and more. So I think some of the things that I've learned in this last job is, of course, next generation sequencing and chemistry, so on. But this was mentioned earlier, is to be able to communicate with different people and with different teams and in different manners. You're not going to say the same thing to an FDA auditor, to your teammate, to somebody that works at logistics that receives the product and just puts it in a fridge. So it's very important to be able to decipher information in the right way. I think that is one of the things that I do regularly. And in fact, I was this morning fighting with somebody with QA on how to say something. So, with that said, somebody said here that you need to learn your passion and you need to find your passion that is so important for your identity. I'm with you, Scott. I don't know who I am still. I certainly continue to search, but what I do know is that I've been able to, with hard work, Eric, as you mentioned, I think I've been able to do certain things, and I would never take do it any other way. Maybe a couple things I would have done different. Maybe learn more at Bethel College, perhaps. Pay more attention, maybe work harder, I'm not sure. But I certainly enjoyed my time. One thing that I have that keeps me going every day is not only science, which to be able to help patients is, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I got into science because of that. I got into science because I liked to see animals and how they function and how they ate and what they ate and how they went through their processes and plants and photosynthesis, etc., etc. Yes, I like that, but I also like soccer. I continue to play it, I continue to coach it, and it keeps me going. I think be able to do both lab work, documentation work, and be able to get outside is great. Here is a team in which I played. We were able to win the championship in Boulder, and then here's coaching my youngest daughter here, and then because I can't have it any other way, another passion of mine is my family. Scott, as you said, I think there's nothing better to be able to do with your life than have something meaningful. Again, something that I learned at Bethel College, because the relationships that you happen to make with your professors are better than probably the average college. So with that, I will thank Richard and Alan. Alan at the time was a professor at Bethel College. He is in McPherson College, I believe, right now. Couldn't have done it with you guys, without you guys. My first job, I know I got it because of letters of recommendation from you guys. My summer internship was because of your letters of recommendations. Janet, your support during BitCon was fantastic during my time at Bethel College. Thank you so much, guys. And then my mentors. Adam Slotnick was my boss at Oklahoma. Spent so many days with him just going over things. He was so patient. Something for us all to learn, to be patient with people that don't know enough. Rob Beatty was my PhD advisor, and he was an interesting guy. He was a very driven young scientist that worked extremely hard, and he installed that into us. And while, I'm not sure I'm gonna go and have coffee with him anytime soon, he certainly was a good boss. So he was work hard, play hard, get things done. Family support, and then of course Logic and Archer for giving me a whole lot of time and effort. I never thought I would be up here. I'm certainly not the greatest speaker, but if you have any questions, I'll be very, very happy and honored to answer them. Thank you. So at CU, we always had the culture that the students should ask the first questions. Is that okay with you? Any questions from students? Yes.
I'm just curious why you decided to major in chemistry, because you were saying why you were interested in science, like photosynthesis, animal behavior, all that. I think more biology.
Yes, and so did I at the time, yes. I think it's one of those things, like Scott was saying, you sort of go through classes and training and you sort of pick what you like best. While chemistry wasn't my first love, I think I sort of fell in love with it as I went through, because to me it sits in the middle of biology and physics, and it can relate biological processes in my experience, since I went the biochemistry route. how to explain biological processes. So yeah, it's a good observation, insightful for sure. Sort of went with what I liked better as I grew up. Yeah.
Other questions?
I can also answer questions about job market too, if you want, not necessarily about my talk. Question over there.
So, you went through and got your PhD and went through the entire process. Do you think if you had not done that, would it have been that much significantly harder to go through the jobs that you've been going through? Or has it been made easier because you got your PhD?
So, I didn't go into detail about my last experience at my last job. That I certainly was able to get my foot on the door because of my connections and because my knowledge. Our assay is fairly complicated, and so to be able to do it is challenging. I don't think you need a PhD to have a career in science. I think it helps to get to a position in which it is easier to pivot and change careers. So I think that if I wouldn't have had a PhD to be able to go from proteomics to NGS and oncology would have been a lot harder. I think Bethel College is very good at teaching you how to learn, not just to learn X, Y, and Z. I think that's why we have certain processes such as convocation and learn about religion and be able to write and be able to do certain things. So I think Bethel College is that. I think grad school is that on steroids, perhaps, if you want to refer to it like that. But I think when you have a PhD, you have demonstrated that you are able to learn and to adapt. And I think that's all. I think I have colleagues of mine that do not have a PhD and are very good. In fact, some of them are probably better than I am, to be honest. But I think the PhD just sort of gives you a sense of a source of validity that you may not have otherwise. But if you're able to adapt within the workspace, go from one industry to another industry, you will be able to demonstrate the same thing. So PhD gives you something, you can have it somewhere else, somehow else, but it demonstrates there.
Any other questions?
I have a comment in regard to the last question. I'm John Dick. One of the things I've noticed in folks that have a PhD as opposed to folks who don't is that they have been through a ringer of being responsible for their understanding of what of the task that's been given them. It's not. It's a matter of being accountable. They realize that when they say something, that they are accountable for the factual correctness of what they're saying. And of course, that comes through other ways too. You've been through the industry where you are accountable. So the thing of having been through the ringer of accountability is something you can tell people.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
One more.
Yes.
It's very different what you do or what you did in Soma and what you started doing at Archer. How do you feel that difference helped you or did you wrong? So basically, I felt like you were really more practical, a lot more practical on Soma logic, and you were more of a in-chief person at Archer. What did you enjoy more? Are you happy with what you did at Archer?
So I am extremely happy at Invitae Archer right now. Yes. My job at Somalogic was good. I just felt there was a bit of a ceiling that I couldn't quite reach there. The work that I'm able to do at Invitae now has a direct implication in patients' lives. We oversee the production and manufacturing of a product that then is going to be able to diagnose a patient with mutation X in their cancer, and therefore the treatment that they're going to get is going to vary depending on that diagnosis. So yes, to be able to get out of bed every morning and have something to accomplish is and something that is going to be felt and is real for patients, it's extremely important for me. I think I have reached a good point in my career. Yeah, I think to be able to put your effort. You're working through some effort at Bethel College, grad school, whatnot. I think it's important to be able to have something behind it and to use it for. So I'm happy. The job is not always simple or easy, or I don't know. Sometimes there's some controversy about how you're doing things, but the bottom line is that it's for something and it's for someone. So very important to me. Yeah.